Dalan Zartman and Tyler McFarland here with Rescue Methods. We're going to go over some go rescue sequences in an ice rescue environment today. So we're not going to be dealing with swift water or any currents that are moving faster than 1 knot under the ice surface. If we have any type of moving water like that, that's going to be considered an extremely high hazard application, and there's a lot more precautions we got to have in place before we're going to consider jumping into a go rescue sequence. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about equipment and PPE. Two of the most essential things that you need in a go rescue application are a body attachment. They can be accomplished in a whole lot of different ways, so we're going to hit on a couple of them. And as rescuers and as organizations, you're going to have to try and find the harness type or style that works best for your applications. I'll discuss the one that I'm preferential to and the pros and cons of each one of those rigs. So in this application right here, you'll notice that number one, Tyler does not have on a PFD. If you are a rescuer in a go rescue sequence, I can't encourage you enough to add a PPE or to add a PFD to this PPE ensemble. Although this suit is very buoyant, it's not designed to provide buoyancy for two entities. And if we're going into a go rescue mode, we want to be able to support the weight of our victim as well as ourselves. So adding a PFD to this ensemble is going to double up that buoyancy, just give you a whole nother safety factor to make sure you keep your head and the victim's head out of the water. On Tyler's attachment points up here, you see that you have the integrated component, which is part of most manufacturers' ice suits. And there's good things about this and bad things about this. The good thing is it's tested and designed by the manufacturer. It's all encompassing and captures both shoulders and torso, but it doesn't have the ability to truly lock. All of these are spring connections. So if you're moving in and out of the hole, there is a possibility that you can load this gate, open it up, and potentially lose your connection point. If Tyler turns around here, the good thing is that on the back, you see that you have closures that are going to prevent this from completely playing off or being removed from the suit itself. So it still remains a fixed point. You're just going to have a lot of play in it. I'm a big fan of redundancy, so what we've added to Tyler's ensemble here is a simple 1-inch piece of webbing that's sized to his torso. You can typically get away with about an 8 to 12 foot section of tubular webbing for this component, and it's going to fit 90% of your guys. You basically take it, form a loop with a water knot, and then flip it into an X. Okay, so it looks exactly like an infinity sign. Whether you rig it to the front or the back is completely up to you. Most guys like to put the X formation on the back and then pull both their arms through it like a coat, bring the connections together on the front, and attach a linking element, which should be a locking carabiner. Here, we've put an additional carabiner on the back, and we're going to talk about why. If Tyler turns around here, we look at the front of the ensemble. Here's this connection point. It's a non-locking carabiner. We could double this up into this ring, change that out into a locking carabiner. Then you'd have good redundancies on the front. This could be his attachment point for his tagline. So the whole reason we're building these body harness systems is as go rescuers, particularly in an ice environment, we never want to come off of a tagline. We want to make sure that if we go through the surface, especially if we have any current, that we can be retrieved from the hole or tracked to a hole and where our entry point is. Okay, so this is never going to get undone in regards to tagline, tender, and rescuer. Those two stay connected at all times in the ice environment. All right, the bad thing about the frontal attachment is that when you give the command to be pulled out of the hole by your tender and you're holding on to that victim, if your pull point is on the front of your chest, in my personal opinion, it has a tendency to drive your shoulder blades down into the ice surface. And if you're all the way in the hole, it'll load your lower back or load your side against that ice edge and make it really difficult to get up and out of the hole. If we flip this around and we put all of our rigging attachments on the back, then it's just like a DRD or a hasty webbing package in a firefighter application, where we're using this pull point to get the shoulder blades and the head up off the surface and get a nice drag profile when we're coming out of the hole and across the ice surface. This rear attachment also allows the rescuer to keep the victim on the front of their bodies as they're being dragged across the ice. That's a really important piece because of how susceptible our victims are in a hypothermic state to cardiac dysrhythmias. We want to prevent them from being roughly handled, bounced around, or jostled around on that ice surface. If we can hug them, keep them nice and tight on our bodies, and give them a cushioned ride back to the bank, That's going to help really enhance that survivability profile. So those are all the different variables. Using a piece of 1-inch tubular webbing or using the standalone integrated harnesses, just know the pros and cons, the benefits, and the lacks of benefits to those different systems. On my rigging, I've got several things. I've got a PFD, which is going to give me that double buoyancy. I've also taken the integrated rigging component, I've brought it around to the outside of my PFD so I have it as an additional rig point if I choose. And then I'm using a commercially designed or manufactured harness. We use these on our dive team. They're also really versatile for these applications as well as swiftwater go rescue applications. So it's just a pre-configured manufactured strap that's got adjustability in it. If I turn around to the back, you'll notice that I've got an X formation on the back. And then I've got a good tri-link on the front. If I'm going to rig into the back on this setup, I also want to make sure that that attachment links into my safety breakaway ring. Just like on Tyler's here, you can see we doubled up onto this strap. The reason for that is when we pull, we want to make sure that we keep this pull point away from his neck and his head. If you have this rigged in just to the webbing, it can come all the way up here, which can potentially pull this connection up into your throat and become a moderate choking hazard until you work it around or tell those guys to stop pulling. Having this as a fixed point lower on your back is going to prevent you from having to wrestle with that when you're getting pulled out of the hole. Okay, so that basically covers our primary attachment points when we're going to go into go rescue mode. The second consideration is a strap or an element that we're going to use to rig the victim. So there's a couple ways to do this. One of my personal favorite ways, because it's quick and it uses resources that are already here, is when you get ready to go, have your tender, take your throw bag line and pull a good solid double arm's length, okay? When he pulls that good solid double arm length, he's gonna put a midline knot here. This is not a rope rescue application, so we don't need to worry about a butterfly or an inline 8 or anything on those lines. Just pull up a bite and put a simple overhand in it. You can see I'm doing this with big blue Mustang gloves on, so I can do this rig myself. Once I've got that knot in place, this is going to be the attachment point that's going to go to the rear portion of my PFD and PPE ensemble. With this remaining segment, is all I'm going to do is pass this rope through this carabiner, which is going to form a girth. As soon as I form that girth hitch, I now basically have a cinching strap that allows me, when I get to the hole and my victim's arms are out on the ice edge because I'm coached them, or I slip in behind him in the hole or slip in beside him on the hole, either way I can grab that arm coming through this hole, link this up, pass it over their body, and now I've got a good cinching body strap. This is the part that's linked to me that helps me ensure that if I've got to use both my arms and legs to help get us up out of the hole, anything along those lines, I don't have to worry about losing him and him descending down under the surface or anything along those lines. I've got a good fixed attachment point. When we start dragging across, I can control him with my legs. I can use this to pull him into me. It's just a whole nother secondary redundant attachment. If you don't want to extend the end of your throw bag line like this, there are manufactured cinching body slings that you can put on your victims. You can also use that same piece of 1-inch tubular webbing or a short section of rope, put a noodle around it to ensure that it floats on the surface, and just girth it through itself, throw some carabiners on it. So there's some hasty things you can do, there's some manufactured things you can do. They all give you great options to be able to grab a hold of your victim and maintain contact with your tender on shore. The only other things that we want to make sure that we take with us as a rescuer are some ice holes, a good application so that if we need to pull ourselves across the ice surface and we're in a prone position, we have the ability to do that. The last piece is a good reaching device. Reachers do a couple things for you. Number one, I can advance this ahead of me as I progress across the ice, sounding the ice, and checking out the ice, sweeping off snow so I can visualize it. When I get close to the hole, if I have a victim who is spazzing out, for lack of a better term, which is not real likely in a hypothermic state or an ice type of scenario, I can go right into a reaching mode, get a hold of his hands, have him grab on or hook into his PFD, and hopefully pull him out of the hole, as opposed to entering the hole and putting myself at the risk of entering into that same water equation. The other piece is when I get to that hole, if I have ice breakaway around that edge, it's brittle, it's given through, it's thin, I can span the ice with this on a corner joint of the opening, and it basically becomes a push-up bar, if you will, to help me get up out of the ice, help me get him up out of the ice, and it distributes our load across a wide plane instead of point loading one of those edges as we go in. So we'll walk through that when we go right into go mode. But that pretty much covers the equipment and PPE ensemble for a go rescue for an ice sequence. Okay, so as we approach this go rescue sequence, we've got to identify or at least discuss the full sequence. The full sequence that's pretty standardized for ice rescue and water rescue applications in general is self-rescue, reach, throw, row, and go. That sequence doesn't mean you always have to perform every step. So we're going to bypass steps to go right to the appropriate intervention or step in that sequence that lines up with how our victim presents, all right? So when we first get on scene and I come off the truck, there's two things that are probably going to happen. Number one, I'm probably not going to be fully outfitted, okay? Unless you're a company or an organization that dresses out while en route, your first due companies or first due personnel typically don't have this full ensemble on. So they're not really in a go rescue mode yet. What they're in is a shore-based first three sequence mode. So they're going to coach self-rescue, they're going to reach and throw if they can, and then they're going to make decisions about what that go scenario is going to look like. When we get on scene, we're going to immediately scan the environment for basic hazards, and then we're going to try and identify if we can have a visual lock on the victim. One of the great things about ice, especially when we've had recent snow cover, is if anyone has progressed out onto the ice surface, we're going to see tracks. We're going to see indications of something transferring across the surface, and then we're going to see a hole. We're going to see a hole in the ice, which tells us exactly where that victim hopefully is at. If you don't see the victim, the likelihood of this being a viable go rescue just became almost non-existent. That is an immediate alert for your dive team. That is an immediate progression towards trying to find a competent person to get a good timeline to develop that rescue versus recovery model to figure out which mode of operation we're going to go into. So for today's purposes, we're going to focus on, we get on scene, we see a viable victim, they're in the hole, and then we're going to immediately go into our sequences. As a shore-based guy, as soon as I see that victim there and I've identified them, I'm going to go into that self-rescue coaching sequence. While I'm coaching self-rescue, it's doing a couple things for me. Number one, I'm evaluating the ice. I'm figuring out how stable the ice is, how intact it is, how thick it is, whether our go rescue is going to have to be watercraft or buoyant platform based, or whether I can just send a rescuer right out onto the ice surface. I'm also out ascertaining the condition of the victim, because that's going to help me determine whether I'm going to bypass reaching and throwing. If I've got a victim who's barely hanging onto the ice edge, he seems incoherent, he's not compliant with the directions I've given him, that's compressing the time frame to get a viable rescue out of this, which is going to mean there's no point in throwing a throw bag to him or reaching to him with a device, because his ability to grab, hold on to, obey directions, he's already in that hypothermic condition, and he's too weak and too incoherent to comply with that, okay? So we're going to demonstrate a self-rescue coaching sequence. When I coach self-rescue, I follow a specific progression. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell the victim to get their hands out on the ice. That's going to do a couple things. If it's really brittly cold and he's nice and hydrated on his arms, he's dripping water, and we've got a relatively dry, clean ice surface, as soon as he puts his arms out onto the ice, we are hoping that a freezing process starts taking place. That's going to take his clothing on his arms and start freezing them to the ice surface. That way, if it does get prolonged, I can't get out to him. Instead of him slipping down into the ice and under the surface, hopefully his arms are going to keep him up above. So, hands out on the ice. The second coaching command is kick and pull. We need to get the victim's hips up, so as they're kicking, flutter kicking or scissor kicking, they're elevating their feet and hips, and they're trying to pull with their arms. If you have a lot of water spillover around the ice edge, and it's not a lot of snow or a lot of good dry ice that's going to give them friction, it's a pretty challenging task to do if it's not something that you practice. So I'm watching, see his strength, see his compliance, see his coherency. If he can get his torso up on the ice edge to where his elbows are bent, as soon as I see his basically his navel break the edge of the ice, I'm gonna start coaching him to try and roll. I want him to roll away from the hole so that he resists the temptation to stand up or get on his knees and potentially point load that ice area or that area around the hole and plunge right through, create a new hole. I want to distribute his load, have him roll away from the hole, and then from there we can throw throwbacks to him, reach to him, or get our rescuers out to him. Once he's out of the hole and out of the water, and he's on the ice surface, he's immediately in a more tenable and safe environment. Okay. So I've got my 10-foot pike pole. I got my throw bag as this guy coming up to the bank. I'm going to immediately turn around. I'm going to identify tracks. I don't need a competent person because I'm going to visibly see my victim out there, and I'm going to go right into my rescue sequence. Remember it: self-rescue, reach, throw, row, and go. Tyler, go ahead and drop into the hole. All right, so we're going to pan out this way towards our victim. Identify my victim. I'm going to immediately engage him. Hey, can you hear me? I can
hear you.
I want you to kick towards this edge. Put your hands out on the ice. All right, kick and pull. Kick and pull. Roll, roll, roll. Roll out of the hole. Great job. Stay put right there. So that's a ideal situation. We get on scene, we coach them right through self-rescue. Once they're away from the hole, now we're in a position to go get them, and we have a great outcome. Now, that's not typically going to be the case. So Tyler's going to re-enter the hole. We've gone through our self-rescue sequence, and he's too incoherent or incapacitated to comply with what we're trying to do. So now we're going to go right into a throwing application. I can't reach him from here unless I want to get out an extension ladder or project some fire hose pneumatically across the ice surface, other applications like that. We're keeping this simple, down and dirty today to the basics and fundamentals. So when I go into throw bag mode, I'm a big fan of underhand throws for long throws. Sidearm throws are difficult to be accurate with, and overhand throws or football tosses are typically when you're in obstructions or you've got a lot of foliage around you, you're standing waist deep in water, or you're throwing from a boat and you're looking for a short, controlled throw. So I'm going to use an underhand throw today. I'm going to create a good arc, swinging my rope bag nice and even, and I'm going to have a good release point, ensuring that my throw bag is going to hopefully be right in line with that victim and pass right over his head. I want to make sure that I throw beyond the hole if that's possible. Also, before you throw, make sure you're talking to your victim. Make sure you're telling them what you're going to do so that they know what to expect. So I'm going to call out rope. I'm going to let him know that I'm throwing rope to him. Then I'm going to call out rope. I'm going to send the bag. As soon as he gets it, I'm going to try and coach him to grab onto that rope. Now, in swift water, we always like our victims to take that rope, put it over a shoulder, and as they're coming down the water in the current, they basically have their back and side oriented to us. We want to try and get that rope over their inset shoulder so that it immediately turns their body with a good ferry angle and allows the current to help push them to bank. We got good body blade techniques, all these things that we're worried about in a swift water environment. In ice, we're going to do kind of the opposite. I don't want him to turn his back to me because pulling him out of that ice hole, if we've got thick ice, is going to just load the center point of his back, and he's going to let go of the rope because it's going to be too painful for him. I want him to stay in that hands out on the ice towards me type of configuration. So I'm going to keep him in that position. I'm going to get the rope right over him. I'm going to have him grab the rope, grip that rope as tight as he can, and then I'm going to try and walk away from the ice hole, bringing him up and out. So we're going to shoot over here towards Tyler. We're going to go right in this mode. Go ahead and get back in the hole, Ty. Okay, Tyler, I'm going to throw you a rope. Keep your hands on the ice. Rope! Reach out and grab that rope. Lock it in with both your hands. Okay, kick, Tyler, kick. Good job. So you can see in that application, even as a single bank rescuer without a litter team to haul, as long as I can get good footing, I can generate enough strength and body mechanics to at least get him out of the hole. We want that throw line to progress right over top of him, keep his hands out on the ice, and then have him lock up that rope. We're now going to progress to the component where, or to the application where he's too incoherent and incapacitated to take that rope. So I've tried to self-rescue coach, and he just continues to decline. He's going to be back in the hole, and now we go right into go rescue mode. Progress. Tanner, you ready?
Ready.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and set on my ice, especially because I got snow covering. I want to make sure I got a good stable platform. I'm not overtly concerned about it because I can see right where my victim went, but I'm going to continue to just prod along. If I'm worried about point loading this, then I'm going to go right to a 3-point stance, and I'm going to slide and glide, just like I'm searching. If this was even more unstable than that, I could go to my belly, use ice holes to pull myself across the ice. But understand, if you're going to your belly and you got weak ice, if you do have a breakthrough, the first thing that's going to hit the water is your face. There is a dive reflex that physiologically we can't do a whole lot to control it initially. If that freezing cold water hits my face, I'm going to take a really deep breath in and start guppy breathing or hyperventilating. It could be problematic if I go really into the water there. So I like having things out in front of me more so than I like face loading. All right, so here I am. I'm going to move quickly, and I'm going to be talking to my victim the whole time I progress. Hey, keep your eyes on me. Get your hands out on the ice. Good. All right, so you see my victim is pretty much incoherent. Because of that, unless he's got something real tangible that I can hook to, make sure my tender knows to anchor me or pull me and get him up out of that hole, it's not going to be real effective. I'm probably going to have to go right into an entry application to get him. You can see that I've elected to use the extension of the tag line. So I'm anchored in on the back. I've created that girth cinch and then attached the carabiner again to the front attachment that I have. So as I approach this victim now, I can take my pipe hole or my extension. I've got a good corner joint here. I can extend that right across that corner, which is going to give us a push-up point if we need it. If I've coached him well, his hands are on the ice, and hopefully they're relatively trapped. My loop is right here to the front. I can grab this hand, pass it right through that loop. So in this application, I'm not even entering the water. As soon as that hand's back down, I trap it, come around the body, rig to the backside, and pull that arm in. I'm now in a good position to get this cinch down on him. And what I need to do is get his hips and his feet to float. So remember, I want to handle him gently. I don't want to induce a cardiac dysrhythmia of any type. So I'm going to ease my feet down, load him on his hips, and float him up. As soon as he's floated, I can get my 3 taps, and out we're coming. Okay, worst case scenario, I've got a victim who's completely incoherent, incapacitated, and I haven't gotten his arms trapped on the ice. Hopefully he's trapped some air, or he's got a PFD on, something along those lines that has kept him at the ice surface. In this application, I got to get in, I got to grab him, I got to secure him, and I got to get out of the hole. The thicker the ice, the harder the transition over the break, okay? So once I enter, I'm going to get him secured with my strap. I'm going to create a bridging point. I'm going to try and get both of our hips and torsos up towards the top surface of the ice. Then I'm going to get my helmet tap to get pulled out. Enter with caution. As soon as I'm ready to make my way in, go ahead and get an arm through. Get him in towards your body. If you got a small enough hole, it's a good practice to get your legs or feet up on a surface to just help support his body weight. All right, I've got him totally rigged now. He's all girthed through nice and tight. You see I got my bridger right here. It's gonna help me distribute load and help me get he and I both up onto this ice surface. So here I do, I've got him. I'm controlling his body so he's not going to be banging around this edge, and I'm up and over the ice shelf. If my back can't get there, I need to roll to a side and secure him with my leg, which will help us come up out of the ice. If I don't have these edges to grab with my feet, and I'm underwater like such, I want to kick to float his hips up, use my bridger, and try and get myself as far up on the ice as I can. Give my helmet taps. Out we come. You can see that I'm controlling his body, controlling the bounce. I got good maintenance of him, as well as my dummy strap for redundancy. So that's pretty much it for the Go Rescues in a nutshell, at least foundations and fundamentals. Remember to train hard, train smart, join the training revolution.